and write this down, you have to learn to be a good passive investor. Being a good passive investor is something that you learn how to do. And it also kind of feeds into what we're talking about, your greatest strengths or your greatest weaknesses. Like everything that's helped you achieve success, your attention to detail, the fact that you dot I's and cross T's, your ability to be delayed gratification with your money, those things are fantastic skills to run a business, but they also make you a shitty passive investor. Okay, let me give you an example. So nobody has more properties managed by Alpine than I do. So we're managing 4,000, just here in Indianapolis, we have 2,000 properties that we manage, and because we've been buying here since '05, and I have about 80 properties. And I have this theory that I've been working on called the rule of 25. I don't think anyone can own more than 25 properties and be a good owner because you forget about deals. So think about that. Now, I would say one apartment complex could be one of 25, but I have this working theory that you shouldn't own more than 25 properties. So if you have 25 houses and you wanted 26, you should sell one of the houses and buy a duplex and keep it at 25. So you should start trading up to multifamily. That's a whole different seminar I could do like 4 hours on. And so I call the rule of 25 because I keep forgetting about deals. And I've had, at any given time, I've had 250 different deeds. And just because I have bookkeeping in place, that means that I'm not losing properties to tax sales and insurance and bills get paid for. But a good property owner is a good steward for their investment. And so you evaluate the growth rate, you kind of know what the appreciation is in the neighborhood, you kind of know what kind of tenants you have in there. You have this like mental checklist about the deal. And when you get too many, I can't even remember addresses. I'm like, what was that? Why did I buy it? What was my plan with it? What's going on in that neighborhood, right? Where if you only have 25 properties, I find that I can really remember 25. Like I have one 60-unit apartment complex in Idaho, and I have an on-site manager, and I know what the vacancy rate is, and we have this game plan, and I know what the equity is, right? But then I have a couple houses here in Indianapolis that I bought for $5,000 15 years ago. I had one that we bought it for $800. And it was a tax sale, and the delinquent taxes were $800, a little 2-bedroom, 700 square foot home on the southeast side of town. And I bought it for $800 at the tax sale, and I thought for sure they were going to redeem the taxes, and I would just get the 10% bump. So I'd get $800 on my money. And they didn't redeem the taxes, so I got the deed to this house. So I'm like, I'm scared to go look at it, right? Go over there, and it's like the family from Deliverance living there. I don't think the kids had ever had shoes. And there was an extension cord to the house next door. That was their power, right? And they said, we'll just give you $200 a month. And I'm like, okay, so I'll get my money back in 4 months? I didn't want to know. I said, yeah, just Venmo me. So for years they Venmo'd me, and I forgot about it. And then they called in a maintenance request, and they said that, hey, the whole subfloor had dropped down to it was just a crawl space, so it just dropped down to the dirt. They're like, we're walking on the dirt. So I'm like, I call my contractor, and I said, hey, dude, what's going on with this house? Didn't we rehab it when we bought it? And he's like, I don't know. I just went over there, that floor. And I'm like, who screwed up the construction? I had totally forgotten that backstory. I had to go back and find an email on the address to remember what was the story on the deal. And I was actually mad at my contractor. I'm kicking the dog when I had probably got 4 years worth of rent, made my money back 7 times. It was one of my best investments, and I was pissed that somehow we had missed something on the acquisition construction of the property, right? And so my inability to remember a deal made me be a bad investor. And so passive is good, but as a passive investor, you still need to be the steward, the quarterback of your money. You need to be a good steward. And it's something you have to learn to do. And there's this balancing act. The second you make your passive investment an active side gig for you is a fail. It's a fail. So I have like a really high functioning client, type A, business owner, worth $20 million, and I'll get an email from him in the middle of the night. 40-point checklist of questions about his rental properties. And I dug in my Winston-Salem portal, and I looked at my Charlotte deals, and I looked at my Kansas City, and I looked at, and I have this question, and why do we do that? And I always think, dude, you're making, at this point, I'm working there a long time, he's making a double-digit cash flow return on his money. So he's making over 10% on the rents every year. He's made over 10% on the appreciation. He's making 20% plus, and he can't leave it alone. He can't just take his 20% a year, because I've been working with him for 10 years. He always goes in and micromanages his passive investments. We answer the questions and we go through, and I always think how much time it's wasting, because this is a man whose time is worth $3,000 an hour. And if I add up the micromanagement time that he spends on his rental properties and the amount of money he saves by making decisions himself, he can never justify it. So he maybe spends $30,000 a year of his time to save $10,000. And I said that to him one time, I'm like, dude, why do you micromanage your properties when they've done fine? They've done great. I can understand if they were underperforming and you're like, I need to dig in to decide if I should sell it, but that's not what's happening. These have overperformed as a portfolio. He's like, I know, I can't leave it alone. He's like, all my money, I'm always going through it and micromanaging everything. And I'm like, okay, but what you're forgetting is the downside of that. Because what is the downside of that? Yeah, I mean, you're nailing all of them. In a vacuum, he can justify, well, I save myself more money. But I'm like, there's a couple things you're not quantifying. Number one, your management companies start to hate you because they're like, we're doing a good job. Why do I get these shitty emails from him? Right? And number two, like, so like everyone in his life, he's irritating. Like his managers, his partners, he's like lives in an ivory tower. But number two, I think that it's you bought it to be passive. That's why you wanted it. You wanted it to be, because my rule of thumb is for every $10,000 of passive income, I only want to spend 5 hours a month on it. That's my rule of thumb. So basically it's an hour for every $2,000 in passive income. That's my rule of thumb. I don't mind quarterbacking that. I want to, check insurance bills and audit P&Ls and go through. That's fine. But the second it becomes more than that, it's not worth my time. And that's the thing that he's missing is he's only looking at the return because he doesn't put a premium on his time. And I'm like, dude, you don't have, is it any wonder that he also doesn't have a second mountain? Right? He doesn't have a second mountain because he's stuck on his first mountain. If he dies tomorrow, there is no legacy. The whole idea is that if you become, here's the hard part of passive. When you agree to make passive money, what you're recognizing is that you're not going to make as much, but it's going to be easy money. Right? Like in my head, I think, all right, Nicole is managing some deals that we're partners on in Winston-Salem, Nicole and Joe, and in my head, I think, well, if I just move to Winston-Salem and I babysit that trailer park, it's going to be better. And I'm probably right. But then I have to live in Winston-Salem, and that takes away from Rigby High School volleyball. Now, I don't have a second mountain because I'm in Winston-Salem micromanaging my investment. What I really need to focus on is, are they doing a good enough job, and not whether I can do a better job by actively managing a passive investment. You see how that's something you have to learn, because you have to emotionally let go of the fact that yes, you would do it better. You would. It would be better if you did it active. But that may not be better for your life. And so for example, I have a bookkeeper that all she does is manage my properties, and I have her log into the different portals from each of my Alpines, and I have her put together a summary every month of the performance of my properties. And as long as it's kind of within line of what I want it to be, I don't look at it any further. Because if I dig into my Charlotte property portfolio, I'll be calling Travis and be like, hey dude, what happened on the sewer line on that one house? Why is it $800? To me, that seems like a $200 repair. And he and I will have a 30-minute conversation after I spent 30 minutes researching that sewer project on that Charlotte house, and he'll hate me a little bit more, and I'll think a little bit less of him, and when the fundamentals of that property are good, it doesn't serve me to actively manage, and so I stay out of my own portals. If there's a problem, I'll deal with it, but I've learned it, like I have to create that separation. For some of you, my high achievers, having my team manage property for you is the only way you're gonna get to passive, because you just can't let it go. You're too fussy. You can't just let your shit be handled. True or false? Greatest strength, greatest weakness. I get a client, super high-performing guy, 70, and he's been managing like, he was a CEO, bought like 60 single-family homes all over the country. He's been managing them all himself. And now he's like, at 70, this is not gonna work if I die tomorrow. And so now he's on this path to convert them all over to commercial triple net lease properties, because he knows that commercial triple net lease are gonna be much more passive than single family homes that he's micromanaging. And he's desperate to try to keep the money in real estate for his wife and kids, but get himself out of the micromanagement. He just can't do it. And that is because he was a CEO. He's a badass. That's not the problem. The problem is he knows he wants passive. He knows passive income will be good for his life. And if I said to each of you in a vacuum, hey, how happy would you be with $20,000 a month passive income 10 years from now? Who would love that? Who'd love to have $20,000 a month passive? You know, the problem is, some of you would think, yeah, but if I spend more time on it, it could be 23. And so you have to understand that about yourself. And you're probably right. You're probably right. But are 20 hours a month, 30 hours a month worth that extra 3? I don't know. Or could you better spend that 20 hours a month on your second mountain? See how it all then really comes down to what kind of life do you want to live? And every one of you knows that there are, whatever financial path you're on right now, you may be on this like $300,000 a year financial path. How many of you know that there's like 4 or 5 other ways you could make the same money? How many of you know that? Like, you know, you could go do this business and make it, you could change to this job and make it, like, you know, there's multiple ways to make the same money. So now at this point in your life, it's, you know, at 51, I'm thinking, what do I want my life to look like for the next 20 years? Now, I have a brother who just sold his business for, I have a brother that has almost $600 million. He's a year younger than me. He's much smarter than me. And he's just a better business. He's like a printing press of money, okay? I'm like the poor one at 50 mil. He's got 10 times what I have. And he and I were talking, and I said, dude, what do you, like, you're 50, you have $500 million. Like, what now? And if you had, give me some ideas, if you had $500 million, what would you do? How many of you would be like, I'll just take 4% a year on bonds? Would anybody be in that category? Because what's 4% of 500 million? 20 million, right? Who would just be like, I'll just take the 4%, 20 million, that's 2 million a month. Who would just? Huh? Okay, and then what? How many of you would call me? Thank you. Very good. I'll be happy to help you invest that. I do have 10 million of this money. Nicole and I have 5. 5 million of Casey's money. Yeah. Casey, brother, son. All right. And so, but he's not doing that. He's trying to make 20% a year on his money. So he's spending all his time now. He sold his company that he works 60 hours a week, and now he's spending 60 hours a week vetting out private equity investment opportunities. So he doesn't just read the prospectus. Like, he goes to the principals, he goes to their office, he wants to see the deals, and he's very, very good at making 20% a year on his money. So